Indiana football has decided on a starting quarterback. We do not know who that is. Everybody keeps asking me, what do I think? Give me a quarter. And that's basically what it is. I'll flip it and I'll tell you. If it's heads, I think it's him. If it's tails, I think it's him. To be honest with you, if Ohio State knew today who it was, I don't think it really makes any difference. I really don't know what they're gaining this late date of not just announcing who it is, but I get the gamesmanship that goes along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're gaining. I also really don't know what you're losing. I've had fans who said to me that, Indiana should be trying to drum up interest and hype and all that. I'm not really into that stuff. I mean, first of all, I'm not trying to pick on either of them, but if either of these quarterbacks was going to come with real hype, then there wouldn't be a competition, Second of all, I just don't think, naming your starting quarterback is somehow going to put 10,000 more rowdy fans in the stands. Like, I think you just, however you want to do it, just, I guess my attitude is probably just however you want to do it, just stick to that. Don't walk it back. Don't decide, don't get cold feet at the last minute. Just stick to what you want to do, what you think is the right thing to do. The other thing I'll say too, and I wrote this in my newsletter this week, history tells us both these guys are going to play this year, and you don't want guys to get hurt. You can't assume guys will get hurt, but Indiana, since in the last 13 seasons, Indiana's only made it through the season 3 times with the same guy starting every game. Ben Chappell started 12 games in 2010. Richard Lego did all 13 in 2016. Peyton Ramsey did all 12 in 2018. There have been a handful of changes at quarterback mid-season for performance reasons, or maybe more a little bit like for stylistic reasons, thinking about changing from Richard Lego to Peyton Ramsey in 2017. I don't know that was necessarily Richard Lego was a bad quarterback. It was just kind of a different offense, and Indiana wanted to try something different. But a lot more of the changes, including going back to Richard Lego and Peyton Ramsey got hurt in 2017, were forced by injury. And so history tells us Indiana's going to need multiple quarterbacks, may even need 3, may even need Dexter Williams at some point. We'll just have to not only
need Dexter Williams, but he brings a very different element than the other two do. I know that they both can run, but his running is just quite different. What he was able to do when he got the opportunity was obviously a huge improvement for the Hoosiers, but he brings a different element. And that's going to bring into the question of not a dual quarterback system per se, but using a second quarterback in that manner.
Possibly. I mean, I think that's certainly possible. The one thing I will say, especially because it does feel like the quarterback run element is going to be a bigger deal for Indiana this year, is that I think I would withhold judgment on the QB run stuff until we see whoever the starter is going live, because it's one thing to do it in practice. It's another thing to do it in games. In practice, you might stick your nose in somewhere you don't normally because you're not going to get hit. But on the other hand, in practice, there have been some times, even in just what we've been able to watch through preseason camp, where like Taven Jackson, for example, has kind of gotten outside the tackle box and turned up field, and they've blown the play dead. And just watching it with my eyes, I've thought, I think I don't know that you could assume he was going to get tackled there, and maybe there's more yardage. And so until we see these guys kind of as runners, I'll withhold judgment on the idea that Dexter Williams is better or worse than them in the open field. But he has proven, and of course this is also provided he's healthy, he has proven he's got that element to his game in the way that neither of them have. And so that, that gets to it too. And then you've got, even if push came to absolute shove, you've got Brock Lowry, who is very much, I think, by his reputation from a high school quarterback in Ohio, is very much a guy that is capable of being that dual threat and of getting out in the open field and running the football. So we'll see. I mean, it's one of the many fascinating layers.
Absolutely. And with Ohio State coming in, Indiana, we're going to get a very, very quick look at what the offensive line can do, because obviously everything starts and stops with the line, the improvement that has been made, because Indiana does have a good running backs room. And it's going to be interesting to see what they can do for guys like Jalen Lucas or Josh Henderson, these guys, and if Indiana can get some breathing room to be able to throw the ball, which they basically have not been able to do for the last couple of years.
And again, I kind of go back to, the questions I have just about the option and about, is that something that is really going to be a staple of what Indiana tries to do running the football? Because on the one hand, that puts more on a quarterback. I mean, that's more decisions a quarterback's got to make. That's more reads he's got to make. That's more, frankly, bravery he's got to show at times. When you're going to come around that edge, if you see the end or the backer coming down on you, you've got to hold on to that football for a long time to make them commit to you. And that may mean taking some hits, right as you pitch the ball. On the other hand, a really good east-west ground game, especially one that's got an option element to it, can make life a lot easier on an offensive line, and can let an offensive line maybe attack downhill a little bit more, maybe pull and trap a little bit more, get out into space, release off of bigger linemen and go block smaller players, linebackers, safeties, etc. So, I mean, as with anything in football, like all this stuff is, fairly codependent, or fairly sort of symbiotic. Each hand kind of feeds the other. If you can be good at it, then we're going to find out if Indiana can be.
Opening up against such a staggering opponent, one of the top 5 teams in the country, a potential favorite to win a national championship, is not what you want to do. But Indiana doesn't have a choice. It is what it is. What can the fans gain from this game? What is the expectations? Obviously, Indiana would like to win the game. From a betting standpoint, if you look at the line, obviously that's not something that people are expecting, being a 28-point underdog. What is the best thing for Indiana, other than winning, to do coming out of this game?
I think obviously, I mean, and this is true of any game, but I feel like people always think it's more true when you play like an Ohio State, fair or not. You want to stay healthy. That's part of it. I think something else that always kind of, I guess, comes to mind for me, or I'm not sure what the word jumps off the page. I'm not sure what the word would be. If you're Indiana and you can kind of, find anything that you can kind of consistently execute in this game, like there's a real extent to which, like, I know nobody likes to talk about moral victories, but you only have to play Ohio State once. And if you open with them, that means you won't play them again. That means the most difficult road game of your season, or home game of your season, is over when the final whistle sounds at 7:30 on Saturday night. And if you can have a game maybe not dissimilar to what Minnesota did a couple years ago, they opened on a Friday. Ohio State had a new quarterback, a slightly younger guy behind center, and some things were clearly there were some hiccups, and eventually Ohio State just scored a bunch of points and pulled away and won. But Minnesota kind of got to come out of that game. I think Muhammad Ibrahim got hurt, and so that kind of overrode it. But there were some other areas where Minnesota, I think, got to come out of that game feeling like, okay, we still proved a little something here. There was still some real tangible good here. If you're Indiana, there's you can set yourself up in a way where there's really nothing but positive out of the weekend, for lack of a better term. And I think it's going to be interesting to see just kind of if Indiana can maybe get itself to a place where, I don't know, it almost feels like it is. It almost feels like there's, like I said, just nothing but positives to take from this weekend.
Absolutely. And Jalen Lucas, he's going to be a marked man. Indiana's All-American coming back. They're trying to get the ball in his hands as much as possible, whether it's in the return game or in the offensive backfield. Josh Henderson. Indiana does have a good core of running backs, and they've added some to that. So although we don't know as much as I'd like to know about the team going into the season, it seems like they have better pieces than they had last year.
I think that's possible. In fact, I would say I agree with that. I mean, what I can't get away from is, I think Indiana is discernibly better on both lines of scrimmage, and there is, other than I guess possibly quarterback play, but really, you still need a good line to have good quarterback play nearly all the time. There's really no better way to improve in football than to just get better at the line of scrimmage in both directions. And on the offensive line, it's because of, I think, maybe a coaching change. I think I've mentioned this before, but I find it fascinating that Bob Bostad was the offensive line coach at Wisconsin and had a lot of success. And then he went to inside linebackers coach, which is obviously a completely different part of football, and still coached a bunch of really good players. That sort of suggests that, like, you can talk about the tactical elements and the X's and O's, that he's just a coach who can connect with players and get them to play with confidence and get them to play with, an edge and all that stuff that coaches like to, all those cliches coaches like to spit out. On defense, it's very much more like kind of remaking a position through the portal. If you look at the last 18 months, if you stack up if you project a 2 deep along that defensive line, it's going to be dominated by transfers, and the holes that are filled maybe not by transfers are going to be by guys, I suspect, like Nick James, who's a redshirt freshman, played a little bit last year. Staff really likes him, kind of held him back last season, wanted to develop him a little bit more, but we might see more of him this year. My point here is, I think it's kind of 2 different paths up the mountain in getting those position groups better, but I do think both are tangibly better, and there really isn't a more surefire way to get yourself to improve yourself as a team than by getting better on both lines of scrimmage. And if that stuff holds true, not just for Ohio State, but just in general, and Indiana can stay healthy in those areas, I think they've got a chance to raise their ceiling.
Absolutely. And actually, for me, I've said this many times to different people, but the Louisville game is the linchpin game to me. They have to win that game, so they don't have to win 4 Big Ten games, but that's down the road now.